Alrighty, another one for production under limited means. This time I want to talk about Aboriginal improvisation. Let me tell you, the Aboriginals, they can improvise. And also let me tell you, some of the worst vehicles you could imagine seeing. I mean, unless you've been to basically Africa, you're not going to see vehicles as banged up as some that the Aborigines drive out in the outback. Oh my gosh, you have to see some of the things to believe it. You know, such as, we've got utes over here. Now, what essentially utes are is it's a car cabin. You know, your two front seats in a cabin identical to a car in the inside, and then the back will be like a light truck. There'll be 15 in the back. I've actually been watching a DVD of some Aboriginals in a show that's called Bush Mechanics. And type in Bush, as in George Bush, Bush space mechanics, into the YouTube search bar, and you'll get to see a bit of it yourself. The whole lot's in Aboriginal, Warrapiri language, all, you know, subtitles. But yeah, there's one there who actually says he used to fit 20 in the back of his, and a few sitting on top of the roof, and then some in the cabin. But my gosh, they get up some funny things, the old Aboriginals. Believe me, what city Australians believe is the same thing that tourists and foreigners believe of Aboriginals, and then when you live amongst them, or near them, or around them, like I did as a kid, you see the real story, you see what really goes on. And it's so far from the tourist image, it is not funny. But they are brilliant at improvising, and especially, you know, in the outback where the cars get a good beating, and they, you know, the cops ain't terribly worried in the Northern Territory and that, so they just sort of, you know, fix them up as rough as they can just to keep them going. And one thing they do in some of these areas, they get a lot of old blooming wrecks laying here and there, and you say, "Flaming hell, why don't they clean some of this up?" Well, first of all, the cost of getting it out of the place isn't what you'd ever get for scrap metal, so they don't bother. Secondarily, it's their way of being able to find another car in close proximity that they can butcher parts off. And I mean, all you got to do is walk like half a mile, or maybe a little bit more, and there'll be another car. Hopefully it's a similar model, but many of the Fords here they built in the 1980s are so similar, the parts are so interchangeable. You know, you can get parts from a 1979 model and put it on like an 87 model, and they, you know, they fit fine. There's so many bits interchangeable, it's not funny, so you can often sort of take stuff out of other models and it'll work anyway. It'll even fit in the place and everything. But yeah, they do some great ones, literally using fencing wire and what they call mulga, which is a certain sort of little tree thing, which is very, very, very dense. Grows out in the desert, and you know, it's seriously dense. And they may break springs in their suspension, drop off cross members, and all these other suspension bits and pieces. It doesn't matter. You know, few blooming bits of wood and a whole stack of wire, and they're away again. You know, they're driving. They can get out of the situation they're in. But there's a couple of amazing little tricks they get up to, and you know, a lot of this is done. Like this series I'm watching is there's a main movie and there's at least one series, and I've got the first series. There was the original movie, and then there's been series since, but I don't know if there's a second or third series. But they used to have it on TV sometimes. Anyway, there's a number of different things they do which are quite surprising. They do use soapy water in place of brake fluid. There's another one they do with car battery. They'll go and make a fire, and they'll get very hot sand near that fire, obviously, because it's out in the desert. And they dig a hole and basically put the car battery up to the level of, up to the top of the car battery, like where your caps are and all that. Pretty much dunk it in the sand like that. And they leave it in this warm sand near this smouldering fire. And it will recharge the battery enough to give you, a few cranks out of it. So it's like, but I mean that, if you can get it to kick over in the first flick of the key, in the first run, you'll get the car going again, and then the alternator will charge the battery up and you'll be fine. And they do that literally by warming up the battery in hot sand overnight near the smouldering embers of a fire that's still just, sort of smouldering away all night. Another one they do is they start fires. When they run out of matches, you get a car battery, and they sit it on the ground, and they put a few jumper leads on, and then they get like a whole heap of fine grass that's dry, and they just sit there touching the end of the jumper leads, and they basically get it to spark, and it just keeps sparking a little bit more. And if you've ever dealt with car batteries, you'll realise the amount of sparks you can make sometimes. If you ever had a mishap like I, on occasion, have had. And they get a fire going from a car battery sparking in fine dry grass, and woof, the grass goes up, and then you throw that in. The rest of your fire that you've probably stacked up, sticks on and that, and or you basically get the grass down the bottom, and then spark that grass, and then boom, it lights up the rest of the fire. But yeah, that's quite intriguing, doing that. The other one, which I've seen not just from Aboriginals, but it is one of the old outback tricks, can work with 12 volt, not really recommended. The best way of doing it is 24 volt. You get two car batteries, and I don't really recommend doing all this to your solar system. This is more a grid down improvisation sort of stuff. But they hook these two car batteries together to make 24 volts. They hook them in series, and then you can get one of your jumper leads and clamp it to a workpiece. The other jumper lead, you can put a normal arc welding rod in, and you keep tapping it, and you'll get a very fine, weak but still okay weld on little brackets and bits of sheet metal, stuff that's thin, 0.8 mil, 1.2 mil, stuff that's rather thin stuff. You can actually weld it together. They show that there. They actually use a bit of copper wire to plug a few holes in a muffler. There's a lot of good things they do, but one of the best ones of all is the old roast stunt. A lot of fire, and they basically have it on, sand out in the desert there, and then as it's all dying down or whatever, they go and dig up some of that sand, chuck in a rue underneath the sand, and I'll explain how it's prepared in a minute, and then, basically throw all the hot coal embers over the bloomin' rue after they've dug it into the hot sand, either underneath the old fire or right beside it. And they, then just let the whole lot continue to keep smouldering. And I think they actually may, at times, put the animal under the sand first and light the fire over the top of it and go to sleep around that fire. Next morning, wake up, dig it up, and you got breakfast. Instant roast breakfast. And what they do is they kill the roo, and over here they're actually allowed to kill things for hunting. Aboriginals are, even things that are endangered, such as the dugong. And, you know, they kill these things and eat them for hunting. They can do the same with turtles. They can get away with killing all that stuff because, you know, it's part of the laws that they can do that, whereas I, as a white man, cannot touch it. But with the kangaroo, they get the kangaroo, they slit him open, take the guts out and throw that away. They keep the heart, the kidneys, the liver, and maybe the lungs. I don't really know. And they put those back in, like the chest cavity or whatever, you know, stomach region where they've got all the guts out, and they fold the skin back over, and then they jam it in the hot coals, or, you know, put it in the sand and light the fire beside it or over the top of it or something like that. So then you know, you can also eat the heart, which if you haven't eaten heart is quite good meat. I think it's better than normal meat because it's very rich. Sheep hearts are anyway. It's lovely meat. Albeit a little bit fatty, but yeah, it's not bad stuff. And of course, you know, then you got your heart, your kidneys, and your livers, and that you can, you know, eat as well as, you know, the legs and all that. And they also showed them doing a couple of emus as well, because they got dirty big legs on them. How the emu we got here is basically second only to the ostrich in size. We've got this other thing called the cassowary in Queensland. That's a pretty big bird too, quite big. But yeah, I've seen them being, they were a bit of a pest where we were in Western Australia, where I grew up as a kid. And yeah, they used to knock them off just to stop them stomping the crops, and some people would knock them off deliberately, run them down with four-wheel drives, and then feed the dogs the leg meat. But I don't know if that's really considered illegal now, but back when I was a kid they used to get up to that sort of stuff all the time. But yeah, that's a few improvisations that Aboriginals get up to. It was a classic of a show. The show, I tell you what, they're driving along in this thing, and I mean, it's only made up for the show, this one, but they're driving along in this car, and they hit a flame and rip a bump, and the car was an absolute heap of junk. It was an old 1960s GM that was basically so far gone, it was beyond the joke. And if you know what termites is, they're talking amongst each other, and they say, oh, this car's no good, the termites have got into it, and it's actually just rusted. I mean, of course, termites, they need wood, they need cars. But they had this big good bump, and they had speakers on the roof, and like for, you know, a concert they were going to do, and it bent the flaming pillars. So they chopped the pillars off, and here they are using the roof of a car with the collapsed pillars. They cut off the ones that were still holding on, and they went and stuck these speakers they had, like, they put the roof upside down on the ground so the paint was actually against the sand, and then where you know, your interior of your roof is, they had that part with all the speakers sitting in it, and then they tied rope onto the two pillars at the front, back onto the bumper, and then drove along with the blooming car with no roof on it. Mind you, the car was missing about two doors and the front left fender and to begin with, but after that, yeah, that was the way they carried all the blooming speakers to talk about a show. God blimey. But anyway, yeah, it's a bit of Aboriginal improvisation, and the old instant roast breakfast that I would try if I had enough sand, and I may try it one day and show you guys the results using a rabbit or something like that instead.